operations of the audited entity, and the findings are submitted to the Parliament's Public Accounts Committee, the PAC. Every year, an annual report is submitted by December 31. Both government and opposition MPs serve on the PAC, and they summon public entity managers to answer questions so that they and the public, the real owners, yes, you, can understand what went wrong and how to prevent a recurrence. What are some things that can and do go wrong? Cost and time overruns, missing financial reports, unreported losses, unauthorized spending, unsupported payments, unlawful contracting, undisclosed conflict of interest, and more. Though the AG identifies the abuse of laws and policies, the law does not empower that office to penalize or sanction, but it does empower the Financial Secretary in the Ministry of Finance. It is also the duty of other anti-corruption and law enforcement bodies to grab the button and investigate to ensure penalties are applied when appropriate. But the AG alone can't watch all. So when things don't look straight, the Minister of Finance, members of Parliament, Cabinet, public servants, and importantly, you must blow the whistle and the AG will look deeper. So this is where you come in, with 4 things you can do to strengthen those who are fighting to protect our future. Tune into PBCJ on Tuesdays for the PAC and mind your business, Jamaica. It's our belongings, but we have to move like we understand that. And next time you hear a news report about the AG, you just left it up to the media. Visit the AG's website at www.auditorgeneral.gov.jm and check out the findings yourself. Then, keep track of how government has fixed the issue, or not, at www.jampja.org's accountometer. And if you're not happy with what you see, it's your job to contact your employees. It's easy when you visit the MP tracker on jampja.org. This is how we can do our part to make Jamaica land we own, Jamaica land we love, and Jamaica land we run well. A message from the Jamaica Accountability Meter portal, funded by the European Union and UK Aid.
You ever hear when Jamaicans say, when laughing spoil? Well, don't miss your chance to laugh. Miss a really laugh and relive the magic. Tune in to PBCJ TV on Friday, June 27, 2025 at 8 p.m. for a broadcast of the PBCJ Watch Party held in March, featuring Win Some, Lose Some, starring Leonie Forbes, John Jones and Karen Harriott, as well as Bobby Clark. Pent Up, a modern film with Rosemary Murray, Dominic Mitchell, Dennis Titus, Sharanda Ferrell. Claffy and the Castaways, showcasing the incredible talent of Valier Johnson alongside Marjorie Wiley, Grace McGee, Charles Hyatt, and Owen Blacker Ellis. 3 amazing productions. The March edition of the PBCJ Watch Party, June 27 at 8 p.m. on PBCJ. And we say laughing while.
Dengue is ordinarily a mild disease. Persons may get a fever, headache, joint and muscle pains. The illness is often resolved through rest and adequate hydration along with paracetamol to treat the accompanying fever. However, on occasions, the illness can progress to severe dengue, which can result in organ failure, bleeding, and severe fluid depletion that can lead to shock and even death. Therefore, it is important for persons who are experiencing fever, vomiting, severe abdominal pain, bleeding under the skin, feeling very weak, or getting confused to seek immediate attention. Let us work together to protect ourselves against dengue.
Today, we can report 2 consecutive years of reduction in major crimes and murders, with a significant reduction of almost 20% in murders for 2024.
Between January 2022 and January 2025, we have reduced murders by 51%, and January 2025 had the lowest monthly murder count since September 2014.
Our efforts have also resulted in the reduction of active gangs by 50%. We continue to increase firearm seizures, and in more communities, we are experiencing less violence. We will realize our vision of Jamaica as the place of choice to live, work, do business, raise families, and retire in peace and prosperity.
The proceeding was brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
You ever hear when Jamaicans say, when laughing spoil? Well, don't miss your chance to laugh. Miss a really laugh and relive the magic. Tune in to PBCJ TV on Friday, June 27, 2025 at 8 p.m. for a broadcast of the PBCJ Watch Party held in March featuring Win Some, Lose Some, starring Leonie Forbes, John Jones and Karen Harriott, as well as Bobby Clark. Pent Up, a modern film with Rosemary Murray, Dominic Mitchell, Dennis Titus, Sharanda Ferrell. Claffy and the Castaways, showcasing the incredible talent of Vollier Johnson alongside Marjorie Wiley, Grace McGee, Charles Hyatt, and Owen Blacker Ellis. 3 amazing productions. The March edition of the PBCJ Watch Party, June 27 at 8 p.m. on PBCJ. And we say, laughing while.
A new story is being written for all Jamaicans. The Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation is on a mission to transform lives. From increasing access to potable water, providing secure homes for the most vulnerable, and helping you own a piece of the rock. We're revitalizing communities and preserving our environment. We're making an impact. See the difference. Feel the difference. Building a better Jamaica for you and me.
You can feel it. Make JC.
Zoom in on the nutrition facts. It there in the table on the side or the back. If you check out the servings, just do the maths. Not taking too much, finger below the facts. Zoom in on the nutrition facts. It there in the table on the side or the back. Take note of the sodium, the sugars and the fats by percent. And let's end up on the right track. You for zoom in on the nutrition facts. It there in the table on the side or the back. Vitamins, minerals and vitamin 2, 20% and more that good for you. You for zoom in. Check the nutrition facts. You for zoom in. Check the nutrition facts. You for zoom in. Check the nutrition facts. Less sugar, less salt intake and less fat. You for zoom in.
A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Jamaica Moves, the Heart Foundation of Jamaica, the National Health Fund, and Japan.
Do you remember where you were and what you were doing when Nelson Mandela visited Jamaica in 1991? What a momentous occasion. Well, PBCJ, the People's Station, invites you to join us for the next PBCJ Watch Party, Saturday, June 28, from 6 to 9:30 p.m. at PBCJ, 5 to 9 South Odeon Avenue, Halfway Tree, where we will show Mandela in Jamaica, highlights of the visit by Nelson and Winnie Mandela in 1991. Titus in Town, episodes and scenes of the hilarious drama series starring Glenn Campbell and featuring Clive Uzo Anderson, Rosemary Murray, Owen Blacker Ellis, Winston Bello Bell, and Claudette Pius. And Mirrors in Paradise, snippets of an upcoming local drama series produced by Barry Vision Film Productions for PBCJ, which hits your screens in July. Join us for unbridled laughter and kin-teeting while you watch some amazing local talent. Trust me, it'll go nice, it'll go epic, it'll go sweet. PBCJ Watch Party, Saturday, June 28, and 6 o'clock means 6 o'clock.
What is the role of a backbencher in government? I'm glad you asked. They're members of parliament who are not appointed to cabinet. So they sit in the back of the legislature and they apply pressure. They examine what government legislates, participate in parliament debates, raise issues and advocate and question chamber when things don't look straight. Backbenchers represent the constituents in parliament. Backbenchers oversee the interests of citizens, you and me. But how can they be agents of government accountability after them no hold a portfolio? And them and a minister? No. So then how can they facilitate government transparency? And the next thing, them and a front bencher. So how them affect me? You see, a lot of work is in committees. So these portfolio-free MPs with less dire responsibilities are more accessible to you and me. So they help with policy, but it helps if we engage them, you see. So they're not just in the back benches, but on the ground, in the trenches. Though in the back of parliament, we're at the front of their cause. So pause. Find your backbencher at jampja.org.
Me, I go show them my way of justice.
I'm abused.
I need legal advice. I don't deserve this.
The truth of the matter is, justice there for all of we. The Ministry of Justice has trained more than 5,600 persons in restorative justice practices. More than 200,000 victims have been supported by the victim services. Legal aid has reached thousands island-wide. Make we talk it out, not fight it out. Call 888 Justice today.
You ever hear when Jamaicans say, when laughing spoil? Well, don't miss your chance to laugh. Miss a really laugh and relive the magic. Tune in to PBCJ TV on Friday, June 27, 2025 at 8 p.m. for a broadcast of the PBCJ Watch Party held in March featuring Win Some, Lose Some, starring Leonie Forbes, John Jones and Karen Harriott, as well as Bobby Clark. Pent Up, a modern film with Rosemary Murray, Dominic Mitchell, Dennis Titus, Sharanda Ferrell. Claffy and the Castaways, showcasing the incredible talent of Valier Johnson alongside Marjorie Wiley, Grace McGee, Charles Hyatt, and Owen Blacker Ellis. 3 amazing productions. The March edition of the PBCJ Watch Party, June 27 at 8 p.m. on PBCJ. And we say, laugh in while.
The hurricane season runs from June 1 through November 30. It normally peaks between August and October. Be prepared. Secure the outside of your home. Check the roof of your house and repair areas that might leak. Also, make sure that zinc sheeting is properly fastened. Trim all large trees within 10 feet of your house. Remove patio furniture, potted plants, garbage bins and toys and place them inside the home. The wind can turn them into missiles. Cover windows with storm shutters. If you don't have storm shutters, use plyboard to cover windows and glass doors. Monitor your radio or television for weather updates and instructions. Be prepared.
Jamaica, I can help you protect our citizens.
Jamaica Eye will play a part in increasing your public safety.
Jamaica Eye is part of an island-wide network of camera surveillance systems designed to increase the safety of you, our citizens. If you have a camera system outside your home or office facing a public space, log on to jamaicai.gov.jm today. Jamaica Eye, we're all connected. The Ministry of National Security, creating a safer and prosperous Jamaica.
Do you remember where you were and what you were doing when Nelson Mandela visited Jamaica in 1991? What a momentous occasion. Well, PBCJ, the People's Station, invites you to join us for the next PBCJ Watch Party, Saturday, June 28, from 6 to 9:30 p.m. at PBCJ, 5 to 9 South Odeon Avenue, Halfway Tree, where we will show Mandela in Jamaica, highlights of the visit by Nelson and Winnie Mandela in 1991. Titus in Town, episodes and scenes of the hilarious drama series starring Glenn Campbell and featuring Clive Uzo Anderson, Rosemary Murray, Owen Blacker Ellis, Winston Bello Bell, and Claudette Pius. And Mirrors in Paradise, snippets of an upcoming local drama series produced by Barry Vision Film Productions for PBCJ, which hits your screens in July. Join us for unbridled laughter and kin-teeting while you watch some amazing local talent. Trust me, it'll go nice, it'll go epic, it'll go sweet. PBCJ Watch Party, Saturday, June 28, and 6 o'clock means 6 o'clock.
We want a piece for Jamaica. Yeah, yeah. We have to be our brother's keeper. Yeah, yeah. Jamaica live good, yeah. I make we enjoy life. What we feel safe at night. Jamaica live good. I better you and I. No say we future bright. Jamaica live good. Come together as one. I make the violence the one.
Most Jamaicans will tell you corruption in politics is deep-rooted, and that's just so it's set, and nothing can do about that. But actually, there is, and another 152 countries are doing it. It's called asset declaration, and it works best where citizens themselves understand it and help to ensure the law is enforced. Corruption happens when public officials abuse their power to benefit themselves, family, or associates. Jamaica's Integrity Commission Act was designed to prevent corruption, and here are 5 things you should know. 1. Under this law, every year MPs and senators must report what they earn, own, and owe, and if they don't, they'll be sanctioned. 2. Their report must include the same kind of information for their wife or husband and children. 3. If they get a gift worth more than $100,000 from anyone who's not family, they must declare it. 4. A summary of the declarations of our Prime Minister and opposition leader must be published where the public can read it. 5. Parliamentarians can now be prosecuted by the Integrity Commission. They can be fined up to $2 million or serve up to 2 years in prison if they don't file the declaration or if they give false information, and $500,000 for not filing on time or ignoring requests for information. Unfortunately, our parliamentarians made changes that prevent the public from knowing when they've broken the law or when they're being investigated. We really need to change that. Visit jampja.org to find out more about the Act and to track if your MP is obeying this law. If they're not, JAMP's MP Tracker will help you write, tweet, or call your MP. Ask them, you submit your declaration yet? The Integrity Commission clear you? Let's help the Parliament stay honest.
A message from the Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal, funded by the European Union and the Inter-American Development Bank in partnership with the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica.
Do your part to prevent mosquito breeding. Mosquitoes will breed in any container that holds water.
Tightly cover water storage containers such as drums, barrels, buckets, and tanks. If this cannot be done, pour cooking oil on the water surface. Punch holes in all tins, plastics, and beverage boxes to prevent the collection of water before disposal. Cover all tires or fill with dirt to prevent water collection. Scrub all vases once per week to remove mosquito eggs. Use mosquito repellents to protect yourself from mosquito bites. Dispose of garbage properly by placing in plastic bags and securing properly to prevent water collection.
A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
I wonder who that somebody be. No, sir. Let me look for my glasses. Oh, that somebody look like rice up. It's Lottie, walk on. Me glad for see you, Roy. Although things never go on for you, America, me glad to see you there.
Yes.
Lift your head high.
Yes.
Stay out of trouble.
Yes.
And you can have a fresh start back home. All right, Mr. D. Thanks, you hear?
Let's all work together for a fresh start back home. The following is brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
You ever hear when Jamaicans say, when laughing spoil? Well, don't miss your chance to laugh. Miss a really laugh and relive the magic. Tune in to PBCJ TV on Friday, June 27, 2025 at 8 p.m. for a broadcast of the PBCJ Watch Party held in March featuring Win Some, Lose Some, starring Leonie Forbes, John Jones and Karen Harriott, as well as Bobby Clark. Pent Up, a modern film with Rosemary Murray, Dominic Mitchell, Dennis Titus, Sharanda Ferrell. Claffy and the Castaways, showcasing the incredible talent of Valier Johnson alongside Marjorie Wiley, Grace McGee, Charles Hyatt, and Owen Blacker Ellis. 3 amazing productions. The March edition of the PBCJ Watch Party, June 27 at 8 p.m. on PBCJ. And we say laughing while.
Join the conversation focusing on Jamaica's development. Tune in to the post-cabinet press briefings. Wednesdays live at 9 a.m. with a rebroadcast at 9 p.m. right here on PBCJ, the People's Station.
This Honorable Senate now resumes. Yeah, be seated, be seated. All right. Minister.
Mr. President, I'm sure we have all refreshed ourselves. I must say that the pea soup, the chef should be commended. The pea soup was excellent, and I am restored. I hope that everyone else is similarly restored and that we can really move through quickly on these two regulations. It has been proposed by Senator Golding Campbell that perhaps the report on elderly care, so that it gets the regard that it really should be, it really does deserve, that be moved to next week. So what we would do is proceed with the electricity wheeling and their law reform, because they're relatively short, and well, one is regs and the other is, well, we have already. But Mr. President, in order for us to continue, may I ask that we be permitted to sit beyond 4:30, that the standing orders be suspended to permit the Senate to sit beyond 4:30 to complete the business of the day.
All right, so the question is that standing orders be suspended so that the Senate can sit beyond 4:30 to complete the work of today. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. President. We start with the Law Reform Amendment of Penalties Bill. And this bill, colleagues on both sides undoubtedly will recall the general outcry of the public on more than one occasion about insufficiency of penalties in legislation. In or around 2018, the Ministry of Justice developed a project to, coming out of the public expressions of concern, to update penalties in various acts forming part of the laws of Jamaica. It was felt widely, Mr. President, and I think it was justifiably so felt, that laws were not keeping pace with modern realities, modern economic circumstances, and therefore didn't ensure the objectives of a fair and efficient justice system. So the bill before us marks a continuation of the measures being adopted to further the justice reform agenda, and specifically to ensure that penalties maintain concurrence with prevailing economic and other conditions, that they are proportionate to the severity of the offenses, and demonstrate that the justice system is indeed fair and accessible. The bill proposes to achieve the intent of Ministry Paper number 57 of 2018 in connection with the review of penalties in legislation in Jamaica, but specifically under areas falling within the remit of the ministry responsible for science, energy, telecommunications, and transport, and where not already provided for. The bill provides for a mechanism for the amendment of monetary penalties by the minister, that is through ministerial order. In developing the bill, Mr. President, and I will make reference because in changing penalties, etc., we want to be sure that senators recognize the thought and effort that has gone into the process, and that these things are not random. So we note that the ministry was cognizant that the revised penalties and monetary obligations must include, among other things, an acknowledgement of the principles of legality, proportionality, and deterrence, which are core to a sentencing regime. The ministry, building on that, has therefore been mindful of the following elements. One, the gravity of the offense. Two, the need to ensure that the penalties outweigh the potential benefit to the offender. So where an offender is deriving commercial benefit, then it must be that the penalties make that risk-reward consideration a non-incentive to committing the crime. Third, the detriment resulting from the commission of the offense, that is the impact, victim impact, even if corporate. 4, the penalties and custodial sentences, that they support a strong regard for the protection of life and property infrastructure, and economic investment. So, Mr. President, the following acts are amended pursuant to the bill before us. 1, the Emergency Lighting Control Act of 1939. 1939, you heard me right, Mr. President. The National Commission on Science and Technology Act of 2007. The Petroleum Oil Landing and Storage Act of 1985. The Petroleum Quality Control Act 1980. The Radio and Telegraph Control Act of 1972. The Scientific Research Council Act of 1960 and the Telecommunications Act of 2000. They will undoubtedly, or rather the provisions herein will undoubtedly support the achievement of national, social, and economic developmental goals of Jamaica in science, energy, and telecoms. Mr. President, in the telecom sector, for example, the increase in penalties for those found guilty of interfering with telecoms infrastructure, resulting in loss, damage, or use of such infrastructure to disseminate false or misleading information is urgent and immediate. It's critical that we recognize that these increases are not to protect the business sector, the telecoms companies only, but also the many, many Jamaicans affected when they lose service. You know, how many times has it been that phones have gone down, or internet has gone down, or cable has gone down, and the result, or rather the cause, has been criminal interference with the network, whether stealing of fuel from a backup generator, the cutting of cable, or the stealing of cable for sale as scrap metal. Mr. President, it is also to protect, again, the victims of persons who use the telecoms networks to pursue harassment and bullying and other matters. Some are going to be addressed under cyber crimes, but the network aspect is addressed under here, Mr. President. Mr. President, in science and energy, the updated penalties are chiefly to protect the confidentiality and propriety of information related development of science and technology against unauthorized disclosure or publication, and petroleum quality and storage against contamination, respectively. So, Mr. President, I'm just going to highlight some of the key elements of the bill. Section 1, of course, short title, it is to be read as the Law Reform Amendment of Penalties Act 2025. Section 2 is the Amendment of Acts Schedule, under which the columns are arranged, Mr. President, in a schedule. So Section 2 is a schedule of legislation to be amended and the relevant sections and corresponding provisions. Under the Emergency Lighting Control Act, Mr. President, there's a penalty for refusal or failure to comply with mandatory regulations. So a person who fails to comply with an express command provided in the regulations made under Section 2 commits an offense and shall be liable on summary conviction before a parish court to a fine not exceeding $2 million or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 2 years. This is an increase of a current fine of $200, Mr. President. And the penalty has stated, you know, surprisingly, the penalty says a stated term of imprisonment of not more than 2 years, but $200 was viewed as the commensurate penalty, financial penalty, and clearly that's entirely out of step, but 1939 might tell the story. Mr. President, the amendment ensures that persons are sufficiently clear of the importance of a national response to any emergency affecting electricity services in relation to this act and the need to respond to any directive to protect life and property. Mr. President, the NCST Act deals with the duty of persons summoned and the penalty for non-compliance with a summons. Mr. President, Section 14 deals with the obligation of secrecy, where a person having possession or control over documents, information, or records communicates or attempts to communicate that information or anything contained in the documents that are not authorized and are done in breach of an obligation of secrecy. So, Mr. President, here the penalty is being increased from a fine not exceeding $1 million or imprisonment not exceeding 6 months to a fine not exceeding $5 million or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years. Mr. President, Section 14 of the Act makes it an offense for a person to communicate or attempt to communicate to another person information obtained pursuant to the authority of the Commission, otherwise than for the purposes of the Act. And the penalty hereunder is moving from, on summary conviction, from $1 million to a fine not exceeding 5, and including a term of imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years. There's a new jurisdiction that's being included here, Mr. President, at 14.4b, permitting matters to be decided in the circuit court. And specifically, the penalty stipulated for the conviction before circuit court is a fine or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 10 years. In addition, Mr. President, a new section is going to be created, Section 17, empowering the minister by order subject to affirmative resolution to amend the monetary penalties specified in this act. So we won't have to do a full amendment of the bill in order to update. It will be a simplified process, and this has been done in several laws as we have been amending them across the piece. In respect of the Petroleum Oil Fuel Landing Storage Act, Mr. President, Section 6, which outlines the provisions stipulating the method of storing petroleum, is amended and updated to create two provisions under Section 6.1 and Section 6.2 by separating the method stipulated for storing petroleum from the penalty to be applied where petroleum is kept in contravention of the storing method that's stated in Section 6. Mr. President, in respect of the penalties, Section 6.2 provides that the occupier of a premises on which the petroleum is kept commits an offense and shall be liable on summary conviction before a parish court to a fine equal to the market value of 1 liter of petroleum stored on the premises in contravention of this section, multiplied by the number of days during which the petroleum was so stored, giving rise to the offense. And B, Mr. President, the petroleum shall be forfeited. Section 7 of the Act outlines the penalty for a scenario where a person deals in or sells petroleum by retail without holding a license issued in accordance with the Act. And currently, the Act states that the penalty is a maximum of $10,000 for each offense. Under this bill, however, Section 7 is amended by increasing the penalty from a fine not exceeding $10,000 for each offense to a fine not exceeding $5 million or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years on summary conviction before a parish court. In addition, Mr. President, a new Section 7.2b is now included, which allows for offenses to be tried in the High Court, that is in circuit court, and the penalty where there is conviction is a fine or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 15 years. Mr. President, Section 16 ascribes a penalty for non-payment of a fine, and this imposes a term of imprisonment for a maximum of 6 months with or without hard labor. But by update, the penalty is expressed as follows. If an offender fails to pay a fine imposed under this Act without delay, the court may sentence the offender to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 1 year, where the penalty is $1 million or less, or 5 years, where the monetary penalty exceeds $1 million. The power of making and amending rules and regulations relating to the landing and storage of petroleum and oil fuel, Mr. President, is set out at 18, and 18.3 provides for the penalty for instances where the rule or regulation is breached. The current penalty is a maximum of $10,000 on summary conviction, and in default, imprisonment for with or without hard labor for a maximum of 3 months. But under this penalty, the penalty is amended to provide that the person who commits the offense, if convicted, is liable to a fine not exceeding $5 million or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years. And this is on summary conviction before a parish court, Mr. President. Section 19(2) provides for a penalty where there's a breach of the subsection that confers the power on the minister to make regulations that discrimination shall not be exercised by an owner or occupier of their employee of a store for oil fuel. The current Act states that the maximum fine is $1,000, which is enforced summarily. Clearly, a $1,000 fine would not provide sufficient incentive not to breach, and therefore the bill now provides that a fine may not exceed $5 million and is enforced summarily in a parish court. Section 20 contains obligations imposed on a retailer in respect of returns and other information to be furnished. Section 22 of the Act assigns a penalty where any person fails to comply with subsection 1, which requires the licensee who sells motor spirits by retail or operates a petroleum filling station to make returns, keep records, and furnish such information. And the Act provides that when failing to comply, the licensee on summary conviction shall be liable to a fine not exceeding $10,000. The bill now provides through 20 subsection 2 that the licensee commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction before a parish court to a fine not exceeding $5 million or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years, or on conviction before a circuit court to a fine or imprisonment for a term not to exceed 15 years. The Act also provides for the ministerial order by affirmative action to amend monetary penalties. Mr. President, the Petroleum Quality Control Act provides under Section 3.6 that the penalty where a report is not made to the nearest police station or an inspector by a licensee or their employee in instances where there is knowledge or reason to suspect that contaminated petroleum is in their possession, control, or on their premises. And under the bill now, 3.6, as it currently is, it will be deleted and now state that any person who fails to perform a duty imposed on that person by virtue of subsection 4 and 5 commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction before a parish court to a fine not exceeding $1 million or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 12 months, or to both such fine and imprisonment. Mr. President, subsection 4 provides restrictions on the retailing and transportation of petroleum. Under the bill, provision is made for a separate penalty for the contravention of subsections 1 and 2, and a penalty for the contravention of subsections 3, 4, and 4A. The current subsection 5 is to be amended to provide that a person who contravenes subsection 1 or 2 commits an offense and is liable on conviction before a circuit court to a fine or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 15 years, or to both such fine and imprisonment, and B, on summary conviction before a parish court to a fine not exceeding $5 million, or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years, or to both such fine and imprisonment. So this is either or, Mr. President, in respect of conviction. So Section 4 is further amended by the insertion of subsection 5A, a new 5A after subsection 5, which provides that a person who contravenes subsections 3, 4, or 4A commits an offense, Mr. President, and is liable A, on summary conviction before a parish court to a fine not exceeding $5 million, or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years, or to both such fine and imprisonment, or B, on conviction before a circuit court to a fine or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 15 years, or to both such fine and imprisonment. Section 14.1 of the Act assigns the penalties for knowingly selling or offering contaminated petroleum for sale. Subsection 1A is amended by changing the maximum term of imprisonment from 5 years to 15 years, and 1B is amended by deleting the words of that provision and providing that on conviction before a parish court, there's a fine not exceeding the market value of the uncontaminated petrol at the time of sale, or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years, or both such fine and imprisonment. And I know we all recall in a very real way the difficulties that can be caused by contaminated petroleum being sold on the market and being unknowingly placed in people's vehicles. So these increases are very important to respond to public concerns about that issue. Mr. President, Section 14.2 of the Act assigns a penalty where a person knowingly delivers contaminated petroleum to a licensed retailer or any other person for distribution. And subsection 2A is amended by changing the maximum term of imprisonment from 5 years to 15 years, and subsection 2B by deleting the words of that provision and providing that on conviction before a parish court, there's a fine not exceeding the market value of the uncontaminated petroleum at the time of delivery, or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years, or both such fine and imprisonment. So Section 14, Mr. President, is further amended by inserting a new subsection 2, big A, after subsection 2 to provide that where a person is convicted of an offense under 1 or 2, the court may make an order for payment of restitution to any person whom the court is satisfied has suffered loss as a consequence of the commission of the offense. Again, a very important provision to address public concerns. Mr. President, Section 15.1, which assigns a penalty where a licensed retailer, licensed haulage contractor, or a person registered as a truck driver under the Act has any contaminated petroleum in his possession. It's also amended by A, changing the fine on summary conviction from $1 million to a fine not exceeding 1/10 of the market value of the uncontaminated petroleum at the date the contaminated petroleum was found in the possession of that person, and B, increasing the term of imprisonment from 2 years to a term not exceeding 5. There's also now a provision under Section 15.1 for a penalty on conviction before a circuit court to a fine or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 15 years. Section 20 of the Act provides for a penalty where persons assault or obstruct the inspector, analyst, or other officer in the course of their duties, or contravenes Section 17.4 of the Act or any regulations under it. And here the fine moves from $200,000 to $5 million, and imprisonment moves from 6 months to 5 years, to a term not exceeding 5 years. The Act also provides, by the insertion of Section 21, for the ministerial power by order, subject to affirmative resolution, to amend the monetary penalties in the Act. The Radio and Telegraph Control Act, Mr. President, Section 7 provides for a penalty where a person establishes, maintains, or uses a radio station or apparatus in contravention of Section 5 or 6, and it's amended by moving the fine on summary conviction from $1,000, Mr. President, to a fine not exceeding $5 million, and increasing the term of imprisonment for a term not exceeding 12 months to a term not exceeding 5 years. Mr. President, Section 9, which states that the penalty where a person who by way of trade or business hires, sells, exchanges, or deals in any radio station or apparatus without a valid license issued for that purpose under the Act, that is amended under the bill by increasing the fine on summary conviction from $1,000, that is up to $1,000, to a fine up to $1 million. And it increases the term of imprisonment from a term up to 6 months to one up to 12 months. Section 10.2, which states a penalty where a person fails to notify the person authorized by the minister of a transaction in accordance with subsection 1, is amended by increasing the fine on summary conviction from a fine not exceeding $1,000 to a fine not exceeding $1 million, and the term of imprisonment from one not exceeding 3 months to not exceeding 12 months. Section 11.4 of the Act, which states a penalty for any person who obstructs, hinders, or prevents an inspector from entering any premises, vehicle, vessel, or aircraft, subject to subsection 2, is amended by increasing the fine before a parish court from a fine not exceeding $1,000 to a fine not exceeding $3 million, and the term of imprisonment moves from one not exceeding 12 months to one not exceeding 3 years. Section 12.3 of the Act, which states the penalty where any person obstructs, hinders, or prevents any inspector authorized pursuant to subsection 1 from entering any premise, vehicle, vessel, or aircraft specified in a warrant, is amended by increasing the fine on conviction before a parish court from one not exceeding $1,000 to one not exceeding $3 million, and imprisonment moves from up to 12 months to up to 3 years. Under the bill, Section 13 of the Act is deleted entirely and replaced. Section 13.1 now prohibits a person from sending or attempting to send any message by means of a radio which that person knows is false or misleading, is likely to prejudice the efficiency of any safety device, is likely to endanger the safety of any person, vessel, aircraft, or vehicle, or falsely suggests that a vessel or aircraft is in distress or in need of assistance, or falsely suggests that a vessel or aircraft is not in distress or in need of assistance. So here, Mr. President, the penalty is increased, or rather is established as one not exceeding $3 million or a term of imprisonment for a term not exceeding $3 million. And subsection 3 restricts the use of any radio station or apparatus with the intention of obtaining information about the content, sender, or addressee of any message, and restricts the disclosure of that equipment except by the authority of the minister or within the course of duty as a servant of the government. Under subsection 4, where subsection 3 is contravened, on summary conviction before a parish court, the penalty is a fine not exceeding $5 million or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years. Section 14 of the Act, which states the penalty where a person uses any apparatus for the purpose of causing harmful interference to any radio service, is amended under the bill by increasing the fine on summary conviction from a fine not exceeding $1,000 to a fine not exceeding $5 million, and increasing the term of imprisonment from a term not exceeding 6 months to a term not exceeding 5 years. Section 14B is now included, which provides for a penalty on conviction before a circuit court to a fine or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 15 years. Again, the monetary 15. The Act also includes the insertion of a new Section 18 after 17, which provides that the minister may, by order subject to affirmative resolution, amend the monetary penalties specified in the Act. The Scientific Research Council Act, Mr. President, is amended by inserting a new 14 big A, which provides that the minister may, by order, subject to affirmative resolution, amend the monetary penalties specified in the Act. And Section 18, which deals with offenses, is also amended by increasing the penalty for a fine not exceeding $600 or to imprisonment with or without hard labor for a term not exceeding 2 years, or to both fine and imprisonment, to a fine not exceeding $5 million or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years. Under the Telecoms Act, Mr. President, Section 7.5 of the Act assigns a penalty for unauthorized disclosure where a person who, by reason of his capacity or office, has by any means access to confidential information or communicates such confidential information in circumstances which do not fall under subsection 3. That is, for example, where the licensee gives written consent for disclosure or where disclosure is made in support of a regulatory or other function under the Act. The increased penalty is moving from $500,000 or a term not exceeding 3 years to a fine not exceeding $5 million or to a term not exceeding 5 years. And I really do want to just make on a personal note that when the Telecoms Act came into effect and I was working at a telecoms company, I remember having to give advice to the company and to the engineers, because for so many years, people had been able to just call somebody and get information in respect of somebody's personal account. Incredibly, people would do it. They would have someone that they knew they could call. And you would get requests from husbands who want to examine the wife's phone account and vice versa. We had to give express advice that the company and you will be liable if you share information that is not permissible under the Act. And thank you so much. And it had to be a change of culture because these things weren't provided for before. So persons' privacy was now embedded in the Act, and the privacy of account information now not only had personal responsibility, but corporate responsibility as well. So it's just interesting to be at a time where 500,000 had seemed like such a major thing, but 5 million seems to round it up to where it needs to be now. Mr. President, Section 9.7 of the Act, which assigns a penalty where a person engages in certain named activities without the requisite license to carry out those activities pursuant to subsections 1 and 2, is amended by increasing the maximum fine and term of imprisonment. The Act currently provides that where a person contravenes subsection 1 or 2, that person shall be guilty of an offense and liable on a summary conviction before resident magistrate to a fine not exceeding $3 million or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 4 years, or to both such fine and imprisonment. And under the bill now, the following changes occur. Where a person contravenes subsection 1 or 2, the person commits an offense and is now liable to a fine not exceeding $5 million or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years, or on conviction before a circuit court to a fine or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 15 years. Section 49 of the Act, Mr. President, which assigns a penalty where a service provider knowingly permits its services or facilities to be used improperly, is amended to increase the fine and term of imprisonment. And the Act currently provides that any person in breach shall be guilty of an offense and liable before a parish court to a fine not exceeding $500,000. And under the bill, the following changes occur. Where a service provider knowingly permits the improper use of its services or facilities, that service provider commits an offense and is now liable, A, on summary conviction before a parish court to a fine not exceeding $4 million, or a term of imprisonment not exceeding 4 years in the case of first instance, or $5 million and a term of imprisonment not exceeding 5 years in the case of any subsequent offense. So this is so that it can't be budgeted for, Mr. President, that you have to make sure that if there's an error, then it is treated as one time, but if it continues, then the punishment goes up accordingly. On conviction before a circuit court to a fine or term of imprisonment not exceeding 10 years in the case of a first offense or 15 years in the case of any subsequent offense. Section 63.1 empowers the Office of Utilities Regulation to issue cease and desist orders, Mr. President, where, for example, a person provides false or misleading information to the OUR, or operates an unlicensed facility, or provides specified services to the public without a license as specified in subsection 2. Specifically, section 63.5a assigns a penalty where a person commits an offense under subsection 1 or 2 of the Act, and the Act currently provides that such person shall be liable in the parish court to a fine not exceeding $2 million or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 2 years. Under the bill, Mr. President, the provision is updated to provide, the Act currently says RM court, but the bill now provides for parish court to a fine not exceeding $5 million or to a term not exceeding 5 years. And on conviction in a circuit court, the bill increases the term of imprisonment from 5 years to a maximum of 15. Currently, section 63A7 provides that an offense under subsection 1 warrants, on summary conviction before an RM court, a fine not exceeding $3 million or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 1 year, or both, fine and imprisonment. And these offenses, like those under 63.1, include providing false or misleading information to the regulator, but in this case, the Spectrum Management Authority, engaging in the use of spectrum without a license, and willingly using apparatus to cause harmful interference. All very serious offenses, Mr. President. Under the bill, 63A7 is amended to provide that the person who commits such an offense shall be liable on summary conviction before a parish court to a fine not exceeding $5 million or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years. On conviction before a circuit court to a fine or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 15 years. Section 66.1a of the Act, Mr. President, which outlines the powers of the court where an application under Section 65.1 is made by the OUR or the Spectrum Management Authority in respect of a licensee who has, among other things, contravened a provision in the Act or its regulations, is amended to order an offender to pay pecuniary penalty to the Crown not exceeding $200 million, Mr. President. I think that is going to require, or that will incentivize a lot of sitting up and taking notice. Let me just reread that. Section 66.1a of the Act, Mr. President, which outlines the powers of the court where an application is made under Section 65.1 by either the OUR or the Spectrum Management Authority in respect of a licensee who has, among other things, contravened a provision in the Act or its regulations. This is amended to order an offender to pay pecuniary penalty to the Crown not exceeding $200 million. Telecoms is big business, Mr. President, so you would recall the considerations that I listed earlier, and one of them is that where there's commercial benefit to be obtained from an offense, the act which comprises an offense, then it must be that the disincentive is a fine or imprisonment, which is a disincentive. Mr. President, Section 69(3) affects penalties for offenses regarding meddling, trespass, and interference with the telecoms facilities. Under this act, and this is the example that I gave earlier, this facility includes wires, lines, poles, sites, towers, satellites, earth stations, submarine cables. And the Act currently provides that the maximum fine is $500,000 and the maximum term 3 years. Under this bill, the section is deleted and amended to provide that someone who commits the offense shall be liable on summary conviction before a parish court to a fine not exceeding $3 million or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 3 years. And two, a fine not exceeding $5 million or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years in the case of a subsequent offense. In respect of B, Mr. President, on conviction before a circuit court, the liability is to a fine or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 15 years. Mr. President, Section 71(2) of the Act is amended by changing the penalty from, and I quote, in a magistrate's court of fines not exceeding $2 million or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 12 months, or both such fine and imprisonment, to, and I quote, before a parish court of fines not exceeding $5 million or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years, or both such fine and imprisonment. Section 72(2) is amended by changing the penalty from in a resident magistrate's court of fines not exceeding $3 million or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 12 months or both fine and imprisonment to before a parish court for breach of any such regulation of fines not exceeding $5 million or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years or both such fine and imprisonment. Mr. President, I conclude to say that as Jamaica seeks to make progressive steps towards the updating of its legislation, and in particular the penalty scheme within its laws, the passing of this bill is more than appropriate and timely, and it's critical to the achievement of the desired outcome, which is to rightly incentivize right behavior and to disincentivize breach of the law. I now seek the approval of this Honorable Senator on both sides and thank members in advance for their contributions.
Thank you, Minister Johnson-Smith. Senator Fraser-Binns.
Mr. President, and I don't intend to be long. Mr. President, let me just say that we on this side have no opposition to the proposed amendments. But the one thing I want to say, and we have said it over and over on both sides, that we have to ensure that we do the time review of our legislation. When the minister spoke about the 1939 Act, for example, it is just a classic example of what happens when we don't review timely. Because though we are not in opposition to the amendments, when one looks at some of the fines and just a drastic increase, we understand the penalty, we understand why it is being done. But perhaps with time review, then we could have a gradual increase in these fines and penalties. And so, Mr. President, I am also appealing to all of us as parliamentarians, and in this case to the government, that we ensure that the time review is done to ensure that we don't have cases like this when you're moving from $50, I think in one case, no, sorry, I think it was 500,000 to 200 million or something like that, but that was an increase. That was a very big increase, and we're not against it, we're just saying that timely review will ensure we don't have that great jump. With that being said, Mr. President, we support the bill and we do not intend to detain the debate any further. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Minister Hill.
I have a very brief intervention, Mr. President. Only, I think as brief as yours. I'm only going to address, of all those items mentioned by Mr. Johnson Smith, really 69 subsection 3, that deals with the wires, the lines, poles, sites, and so on. Because it's administered by my ministry, the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce. And what we've done, we've put together the Customs Agency of Jamaica, JCA, the Jamaica Customs Agency. The Factories Corporation actually operates it for us. It's now at a site that is not great. Factories Corporation, in fact, is going to move it, the whole operation to a facility on about 13 acres. They collaborate very importantly with the transformed and very efficient Jamaica Constabulary Force. And so together, especially the telecoms company, Digicel and Flow, they collaborate with the operators and make sure as they oversee this business, you no longer hear of every week or every month how many manholes are stolen, and we make sure we check the copper very well. And it's administered and overseen by technicians in the ministry. And we've seen the cost go down, but the fines, Senator Fraser Binns, we've looked at it and discussed it with all those people I just mentioned, including the practitioners, and where we're moving now from, say, $40,000 to $1 million, or in that vicinity, in one case to $3 million, and from 1 year to 5 years imprisonment. You have no idea what havoc thieves bring when they interfere and they go in there. It's disastrous. You see they've taken on the brand new cable that is extremely costly, and it takes time to order them back, bring them back in. And therefore, Mr. President, I'm of the view, certainly believe, that the fines that are now mentioned, not mentioning, remember now I'm sticking to 69 sub 3. The 200 million is in the cybersecurity end, but we know the kinds of money that telecoms make. I'm not going to discuss that today, but I'm certainly supporting the fact that on the case of manholes and cables and so on, the fines are fair and justified, and I support these amendments.
Thank you very much, Minister Hill. Minister Johnson Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I thank members on both sides for their support and recognition of the importance of the matter that's before us. I just wanted to, to confirm that that we agree that it's important that these matters be kept under review regularly.
Yes.
To avoid this type of occurrence. And it's why I read the years of each act, because 1939, Mr. President. No review. That's pre-independence. There's a lot. There's a lot. If so, he's doing well.
Would you say?
Mr. President, you'd have to give me a secret or two if that were. Yes. But Mr. President, thank you again to colleagues for their indication. The case which provides the matter which provides specifically for a new pecuniary penalty, just to clarify so that Senator Fraser Binns, if that number hits the headline, that people are clear that this is where directly, knowingly false information is given by an operator, licensed operator, to a regulator. And we know the regulator requires true information to us, whether it's to assess new rates, whether it is to check on compliance for customer service, and the receipt of customers of compensation, whether it is that they're meeting their regulatory requirements for which they should pay a fine if not. Mr. President, it's fundamental that if there's a knowing criminal act in this regard, that it be punished accordingly. And this is the only offense that has such a very high penalty. Although the others have jumped significantly, I don't think there's anyone that could be looked at as inordinate, given where the current modern circumstances are. But in that regard, Mr. President, I wish to ask for second reading of the bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Minister Johnson-Smith. The question is that bill be read a second time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Senate will now resolve itself into a committee. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Moving ahead of ourselves. Right?
An act to amend provisions relating to penalties and monetary obligation in various enactments and for connected matters read a second time.
And the Senate will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate to consider the bill clause by clause. Marshall? Marshall? Hold a second. Let me get the red mark on.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I ask the acting leader of opposition business in the Senate, whether she would be amenable to us taking the bill en bloc, given that there are no amendments to be sought.
Hold a second. Hold a second. Go ahead. And I have to give to Senator Gabriela Morris to speak from a seat that is not her own and may become hers permanently.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, Senator, we will go ahead in that way. That's fine.
And you see how cooperative the leader, acting leader can be. The first intervention.
Let's not put her in a problem by being too joyful. So just yes. Okay, well done.
All right. I'm telling you, a lot can happen in one day, right? Okay, so I have just two clauses. So I'll put clause 1 and clause 2. Those in favor? Ayes have it. I put the schedule. Those in favor? Ayes have it. I put the title and the enacting clause. Those in favor? Those against? Ayes have it. Question is that I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Minister?
Mr. President, might I ask for third reading of the bill?
Questions that the bill be read a third time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
An act to amend provisions relating to penalties and monetary obligations in various enactments and for connected matters read a third time and passed.
All right. Minister Johnson-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, Mr. President, we're here on round 3, and on this occasion, it is to pilot the electricity wheeling regulations made pursuant to Section 55(1) of the Electricity Act, and these are pursuant to the notice of motion which was laid last week, Mr. President, seeking the affirmation of same. Mr. President, just to indicate that electricity wheeling in Jamaica was codified in the amended and restated All-Island Electric License 2011, granted to the JPS in that year, Mr. President. It provides for the movement of electricity, that is power wheeling, across the national grid by self-generators, and I quote, on a basis that is cost reflective and consistent with tariffs and the price controls as approved by the office. And of course, the office in this case is the OUR. Mr. President, in pursuance of the objectives of the promotion of energy efficiency and the use of renewables and other energy sources, wheeling is intended to provide opportunities for fuel diversification, the deployment and development of renewable energy sources, and to provide a legal framework for self-generators that helps to secure access to long-term financing as well as recoup investment capital. So, Mr. President, this government believes firmly in reducing the cost of doing business and the cost of electricity. The latter, of course, being a big part of the former. It's one of the most important factors in that regard. We're also committed to Jamaica's energy transition so that we're not only able to reduce Jamaica's carbon footprint, but we're able to meet our goal of 50% renewables by 2030. And the energy transition to renewables will, of course, help both. We're proud, Mr. President, that the government is also seeking to deliver lower light bills to personal accounts, to individuals, to homeowners. And this by reducing GCT on household electricity from 15% to 17%. To 7%. And that's what's there. Yeah. and to expanding electricity service to more rural communities. Mr. President, we have developed a new, or rather an expanded prepaid electricity program with special benefits for the first 20,000 householders who subscribe, as well as electric wiring costs to be paid by the government, plus a stipend for 6 months towards prepaid electricity. These actions intended to lower the cost of household electricity and to go forward with the electricity wheeling regulations provides firm evidence that we are serious about tackling the cost of living and the cost of electricity. Mr. President, wheeling is intended to support an efficient and environmentally sustainable energy sector that's affordable and accessible. It's defined as an arrangement where a self-generator provides electricity to the system or on terms pursuant to which an equivalent amount of electricity may be used from the system at one or more locations in accordance with this Act and any regulations made under. It's designed to be more suited to providing energy efficient options for commercial users. So you can generate your energy with solar, and the excess could be sold back to the grid, but of course at rates that are agreed. You might provide your solar to another subsidiary of your company, and so that it incentivizes you to produce, and then the excess is sold back to the grid. So, Mr. President, it again not only promotes alternate uses, that is other than fossil fuel, which also generates energy security, making sure that our economy is more secure against the volatility of fossil fuel pricing, as we see occurs and has been occurring recently. Mr. President, the wheeling facilities have two processes. One is the grid interconnection licensing process, and the other is the contracting process, which will be administered by the MSET and JPS respectively, recognizing that right now under our arrangement there's only a single buyer, and the single buyer is the power generator, the main power generator, that is the JPS, the owner of the grid. So, Mr. President, self-generators wishing to participate in this facility will be required to apply for an electric power wheeling license and an electric power wheeling contract to meet minimum eligibility criteria, which are contained in the regulations. So there is a floor of 1 megavolt amperes, Mr. President. 1 megavolt ampere is the floor of provision to entitle you to start to participate in this process.
1 meg.
Call it 1 meg?
1 meg.
but not a telecoms MEG.
Yeah,
electricity MEG.
Electricity MEG.
Okay, I'll call it a MEG. But there's no ceiling. So that's the floor, there is no ceiling. And all applicants will be required to pay a use of system charge to the JPS, and that too is provided here. Mr. President, the first regulation Regulation 1, it provides that the regulations will come into effect on a day appointed by the minister by notice published in the Gazette. So it doesn't take effect as soon as we affirm it here. And the Regulation 2 provides for interpretation, the definitions for electrical inspector, firm capacity, a meter, a wheeler, and a wheeling meter, because, Mr. President, there is actually a bidirectional meter that's required to be installed at the entry and exit points to measure the electricity passing, entering and exiting the transmission and distribution system. So, and of course, you know, electrical inspector would be as registered under the electrical work registration and licensing regulations. Mr. President, the criteria for entering into the wheeling contract, the main ones, I will just list them for the Senate's understanding. They must demonstrate that their existing account with the single buyer is in good standing. They must be able to show an ability to meet an average annual demand in excess of 1 meg. Mr. President, they must establish an ability to pay for all costs associated with interconnecting the generating set and the wheeling service. They must be able to generate electricity on a sustained basis, Mr. President. And they must own more than 50% interest in the subsidiary entity and at the exit point and subject to market study. And, Mr. President, the energy generation set, it must be compatible with the single buyer's transmission system after completion of a wheeling grid impact study. Mr. President, they must also obtain all environmental permits and licenses. Mr. President, Regulation 4 sets out the obligations of the single buyer to implement these wheeling arrangements. So once the eligibility criteria are met, and it's established that the wheeling arrangements will not negatively affect service to other customers, so again, the regulations protect other customers on the grid as importantly or more importantly than the buyer. So the buyer must conduct its inspections because it is a corporate entity, and it must do its due diligence because it owns and operates a network. But the inquiries must be undertaken within 30 days, 30 working days of being notified by the minister that a license is granted. Yeah. So they don't get to just perform the investigations or the inspections or inquiries at their own pace. It must be that within 30 days they move on to get it done. And that's an important provision. The Regulation 5 provides for the application process and for the form that's attached to the regulations, Forms 1 and 2. And it indicates that the minister may request additional information or documentation if it is considered relevant. Regulation 6 addresses the wheeling contract, Mr. President. And while there is there are several provisions, but let me just say that where the license is granted, the single buyer and the self-generator have 90 days from the date of the license granted to execute the wheeling contract approved by the OUR. So again, this does not create a process that is just within the discretion of the parties who have different commercial drivers to figure it out. It means that they have to actually set a target of completing their arrangement and putting it before the OUR for approval within a set period of time. The wheeling contract must not be provided for a period that exceeds the electricity license, Mr. President. And under this provision, it also provides this regulation that they must be paid at such rate for the top-up, standby, or excess energy sales that are determined by the OUR, and to be paid the use of the system charge together with such other rates approved by the OUR, and also for to be compensated for costs associated with interconnection of the generation set to the system. Mr. President, a wheeler can only be granted one generation license for one activity, and may not use one license to perform different activities related to self-generation of electricity. Mr. President, the duration of the license issued by the minister shall be valid for 10 years, and the use of system charge is provided for, again, under Regulation 8 in accordance with the arrangements provided for by the OUR. It must not be limited to standard costs, losses, grid operation, maintenance improvements, and the termination notice prepared by the OUR. Mr. President, Regulation 9 speaks to the single buyer's obligation not to charge security deposits or insurance coverage for a wheeling arrangement. So this, Mr. President, is a provision that ensures that the barriers to entry are removed. It means that if you are a smaller business seeking to get into the energy sector, then you cannot have additional costs put on you that would be prohibitive to your interconnection, like a security deposit or for insurance coverage that you wouldn't normally have taken out. So, Mr. President, if a single buyer commits an offense by insisting that these things occur, the single buyer on summary conviction would be liable to a fine of up to $2 million. Mr. President, under Regulation 10 is created the obligation to execute the wheeling contract. If the self-generator fails to execute the contract within 18 months of the effective date of the license must be revoked within Section 13 of the Act, and the single buyer will be discharged of any obligation to connect the self-generator to the system and to enter into a wheeling contract. So you can't just say you're coming and have people expend large sums of money to interconnect with you and have studies undertaken by the government and the regulator and the operator, and then you don't have your business in order. You must be ready to do business, and if you are not, then there is no obligation for you to be able to come back and continue at another time. This has to be taken seriously, and this was done to balance the obligations on both sides. The source of generation for wheeling arrangements is dealt with under Regulation 11, which requires that the wheeler use a firm capacity in accordance with Regulation 3. And 12 speaks to the obligation that where a license is granted and the contract executed, the wheeler is responsible to procure and utilize electrical protection systems and software to permit the system operator to monitor in real time the firm capacity required for wheeling arrangements. Mr. President, Regulation 13 deals with the restrictions on the wheeler connecting the system. It places a restriction on the person to not connect the generation set to the system unless they have received an electricity license for wheeling, unless they've executed the wheeling contract, unless they've received certification from a licensed electrical inspector for compliance and specification in accordance with the specifications, and they must have received approval from the single buyer for grid connection. And if there's an offense committed under this, Mr. President, the liability on summary conviction is to a fine not exceeding $3 million or in default to imprisonment not exceeding 2 years. Mr. President, Regulation 14 deals with the wheeling meters, and Regulation 15 deals with disputes, placing them within the remit of the OUR. Regulation 16 specifies that the single buyer may disconnect wheeling service with at least 48 hours pursuant to the wheeling contract for overdue sums by the wheeler. And 17 speaks to compliance with relevant permits and licenses. Mr. President, Regulation 18 deals with the duty of the wheeler to maintain generation set, maintenance records, and to rectify defects. And Regulation 19 deals with the duty of the buyer, the single buyer, regarding operation and maintenance of systems. Mr. President, Regulation 20 outlines the obligations of the wheeler or the owner or person in charge of the premises or firm capacity technology, as the case may be, to provide to persons named in the provision reasonable and safe access to the premises and generation set. So this would include the government electrical regulator, the OUR, a licensed electrical inspector, or the single buyer. And these mentioned persons entering the premises for specified purposes are required, of course, to provide reasonable notice of inspection or audit. Regulation 21 deals with the offense of restricting the access to wheelers generation set, Mr. President, and then there is a schedule. The schedule is split into two parts, and Part A contains the application form for a license application and submission of a checklist of supporting documents and information, as referred to in Regulation 5, and Part B contains the details regarding the applicable fees for Regulation 5. And they're set out here, Mr. President. The license fee is $3,600 per kilowatt, and the processing fee is $19,000. So, Mr. President, I conclude, again, to reaffirm the fact that the government is determined to offer leadership on the issue of confronting the climate crisis by incentivizing the use of renewables, and we believe these regulations are critical to establishing clean, sustainable, and reliable sources of energy. The wheeling arrangement is an important step towards our goals in this regard, Mr. President, as I mentioned earlier, and in this context, I seek the approval of members of this Honourable Senate on both sides. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Minister Smith. Senator Allen. Check. Use another microphone because that one seems as if it's giving out. Okay.
Thank you,
Senator
Mr.
Allen,
President.
and permission to speak.
Permission to speak from a seat other
Yes.
than my own.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, it's not very often, Mr. President, that this Bay girl is in Kingston for so long, for so many hours. So it seems as if I'm staying in Kingston tonight. For safety purposes, it's easier to travel by daylight than night. Mr. President, I rise to just make a few comments on these regulations that are before us, the Electricity Wheeling Regulations 2025. We are fully aware, and I believe Senator Fraser-Binns and others have echoed this position, this view, that these regulations ought to follow soon after the implementation of a new act, a new law. And this would have accompanied, or should have accompanied, the 2015 Electricity Act, which should have also been reviewed within 5 years of being passed. So that would have been 2020. And since I've been in the Senate, I have been on the Joint Select Committee for the Electricity Act, which is still not complete, which is a travesty because after 10 years, near 10 years, we haven't had the review, and we are just now completing or getting these regulations, and we ought to have had, and I'm sure by the time we have a new act, we're going to have to be doing over regulations, at least reviewing them, at least reviewing, you know. May not have major changes, but at least reviewing. So the truth is that the matter of the legislative process, the legislation and the development of legislation and passage thereafter, we have to do a better job of reviewing, updating, having the attendant regulations to support the work, because otherwise we're not being effective in all that we're supposed to do. Of course he has to agree, he's a smart man. So, where we are today, looking at wheeling, and the minister explained wheeling, and I just want to underscore the whole wheeling process, because the truth is that those who are able to take advantage of wheeling are typically large companies, large enterprises, because of all that had been described by the minister. in order to enterprises that with multiple locations would be the ones entitled or likely to be able to do it. So it's not for every small house or wherever. But the truth is, wheeling should be able to impact productivity if it is that it is operating in a way, because it is an intention to drive down the cost of electricity overall. And we all know electricity is a major factor in productivity. It moved from about 23 cents per kilowatt hours to somewhere in the region of 40 now. So the fact is, wheeling is important to businesses, is important to productivity, and overall important to cost of living. So we support it. In fact, this is a product of the work that we have done in the previous administration of the People's National Party. Yes, I'm claiming anything that is to be claimed rightfully shall be claimed without question. No, it's not about shame. Fact is fact. Because this act, the new Electricity Act, which ought to have been reviewed by 2020, is a product of the work at the time under the leadership of the former Minister of Energy, Philip Paulwell. Facts are facts. So, the fact is, Minister Hill, Senator Hill, we have already established that you are a smart enough man to agree with me. So let us just maintain it. Okay? So there are no objections to this the regulations that are before us. In fact, we are supportive of them because they are part of what we have promoted as part of the process of reducing the cost of business operations, and therefore reducing the cost of productivity. So we are in support of it, but what I want to underscore is that this process is 10 years in the making. Now, 10 years in the making is not satisfactory. There has to be more efficient movement of regulations and laws. Otherwise, Jamaica will continue to fall behind and produce at the level that it ought to produce. So I'm here to just remind us that this, along with the Electricity Act, are both behind time. The Electricity Act, as I said before, I'm sitting on the Joint Select Committee now for near 4 years, and we're still not complete. And we're about to have the closure of another term of our parliament, and it's not completed. And electricity, which is such a crucial part of everyday life and cost of living, is not getting the attention that it truly deserves. So I'm just saying to the government, the current government, because there shall be a new government, the current government, that we have to do better in terms of especially electricity, which plays such a vital role in the cost of productivity and the cost of living overall. So I have no objections to what has been laid out here in the regulations at all. It's the process that I have grave difficulty with, because it is not productive, and we have to step it up. We have to do better than that. Mr. President, thank you very much.
Minister Hill. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I just want to say how valuable this will be for ordinary Jamaicans. Senator Allen is right. This is done by big companies. And something that's in the regulations we're looking at, for a company to get this, they either have to have a division of the company or a 50% owned subsidiary, 51% I think, to be owned by the company. So it's not just, you know, I know Senator Allen, and I have this wheeling thing, and I own 20% of her company, and we're going to do a thing. You can't do that. You have to have a certain percentage. So there are rules. But there's one very important thing that we need to understand, Mr. President, and it's this. In my last calculation, 15 of the biggest companies in Jamaica have left the grid. They've gone and set up their own electricity. They either use gas or they use heavy diesel to set up their generators because they just didn't want to deal with the cost and the issues that are involved with the present system. Now, if you're running a power company and you don't get, you don't have the kind of license that this company has, you would be looking to make sure every one of your big companies stay on it. Well, wheeling, and it may have taken some time, Senator Allen, but wheeling is a very good thing because it then means that a big company, let's say Grace Kennedy or whoever you want to pick, Fontana, has an operation in, they can do it. They have an operation in Kingston. Indeed, very much so. And they have an operation in Montego Bay, or they bought a subsidiary. They bought out somebody's company in Montego Bay and took it over. And they want to wheel from here. So what they do is they have excess capacity in Kingston. They put it on the grid and then allow us or make the arrangement that Senator Johnson-Smith outlined with JPS to take the power back in Montego Bay. What does that do? It means that another big company stays on the grid. We have to have, I am very much in support of renewable energy, very much so. However, I do not advise people who take renewable energy to come off the grid. Because every time you have somebody, especially a big company that comes off the grid, the price goes up for ordinary people like me from Southfield. And yes, ordinary people like me from Southfield, Mr. President. And it goes up for really all individual users. So I am very pleased that wheeling is coming in at this time. It is de-risking the system that we have. I hope it will stop big companies going off the grid because we want them all on the grid, and that this system will be even better because twice this week I've been at opening of facilities with the Prime Minister, and he's made it very, very clear, very, very clear. Groundbreaking for MJS, Technologies, out there in Spanish Town, right by the train line, and of course, Garmex factory, where there was another groundbreaking there. And then, thank you. Mr. President, yesterday we had to go and inaugurate the new cement investment, 42 million Jamaican dollars. Sorry, 42 million US dollars. That has gone into this, about 7 billion Jamaican dollars they put in the last 18 months to 2 years. And overall in the past 5 years, $100 million. So every time we open something at MGS Technology, they've built out 300,000 square feet there. They're going to build another 300,000. Garmex is going to build another 200,000. Cement, cement, cement. Employment for Jamaicans. And all those companies, Mr. President, I hope will be using the wheeling facility that Minister Johnson-Smith so ably outlined for us. If it pleases you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Minister Hill and Senator Fraser-Binns.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. President. And I did tell Minister Hill that if he speaks, then I will speak. And alas, he spoke, so I shall speak. Mr. President, let me just start off by saying, as Senator Allen said, that we do not oppose and we do support the regulations before us. In fact, as the minister has so graciously conceded, the act was passed by the People's National Party administration in 2015. And so we have no basis upon which to object to the regulations. We think it's a good thing for some of the reasons that the minister had said in terms of the large companies being able to balance the grid. But, Mr. President, one of the things that I would have liked to have seen coming to us today, in addition to the regulations, is just a review of the conditions. And it goes back to what Senator Allen said about the act, the Joint Select Committee that was established. I was a member, and then Senator Allen took over from me almost 5 years ago, perhaps 4. And because within these 10 years, so much has changed, Senator Hill. Yes. And I say that because in 2015, when we commenced, or when we passed the act, there was some discussion about renewables, about the grill, about wheeling. But in 2025, renewables is in fact the order of the day. And because renewables is the order of the day, then we have to look to see if the legislation that facilitates wheeling supports what is the new norm, or what ought to be the new norm. It is my humble submission that it does not. And I say that because when one looks at the criteria that one has to pass, or the conditions to be able to be qualified for wheeling, including the 1 MVA or the mega ampere, if that's how it is pronounced, then the studies shows, at least my research shows, that really we just have about 7 companies in Jamaica that could qualify. That is because, not just because of the annual usage, but also because of the requirement for multiple location. And if we're serious about making things easier for the ordinary Jamaican, if we're serious about ensuring that our legislation reflects our present-day realities, then I want to see some of those conditions reviewed. So I want to see, for example, Senator Hill, that we don't stick at 1,000 or 1 MV, but that is reduced, which allows more people to be a part of the grid. That is how we democratize the grid, to make it much easier. Because like you, Senator Hill, I do not want people to leave the grill, because when they leave, it's more cost for the regular Joe. But it also gives them more opportunity and give other consumers, not just this, what's the term that is used here? Let me get the correct term, forgive me. The correct term is the single buyer. So it's not just a single buyer who will be able to purchase the excess from the wheeler, but anyone else could be a buyer. And I understand that the regulations can't make that change, but the Act could make the change. And if we had done what ought to have been done, then the change that what we'll be discussing today is not just the regulations that allows, in this case, JPS to be the sole buyer, but it would allow other persons or other small businesses to be part of the system so they too can benefit. And this is how we should allow technology, renewables, to work for us. And so, Minister, whereas we support the regulations before us, I would have wanted that. And there are so many benefits that can be derived from it. You know, you talk about some inner city communities, you talk about some rural communities. And when you look at what happens, say, for example, in Africa, you have wheeling being done by community groups. So they own it, and the money that they derive from it, they use it to develop communities, whether it is a sports field or homes or schools. I mean, it's a whole enterprise that is developed from wheeling in some countries. And I believe that is where Jamaica can be, and that is where we must be. And the legislation is going to give us the tool, or one of the tools, to get there. And finally, Minister, and I do not know if you are in a position to answer, but you are aware that the agreement with the JPS comes up for renewal in another So, Mr. President, it does come up, and there's a provision that there's a requirement for notice to be given. I wonder, Minister, if you're in a position to advise us whether anything has been done in that regard, or where we are in that regard. And with that being said, Mr. President, I thank you so much, and we support this bill, if it pleases you.
Thank you, Senator Fraser-Binns. Minister Johnson Smith.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President, pardon me. And thank you very much to colleagues on both sides. Just to make the point that, you know, we agree that it would be better to have more buyers. But I think it's just always important to remember and recall, since we're owning and claiming everything, that the license which binds us was negotiated by former Minister of Energy, Philip Paulwell, on your side. And on the matter of the notice and its renegotiation, just to say, and I mean, we've been bound by it for years, and hands tied literally by it. But I would have no update on the process beyond Minister Vaz's response to his counterpart, his opposition counterpart, which took place in Parliament. If I recall correctly, he must have asked the same question 3 or 4 times, and it had caused some frustration. So I remember the interchange. It was reported. It was, he just kept asking the same question. So just to say, Mr. President, I just want to share the point as well that wheeling is actually a very expensive undertaking. So while it's an admirable dream to say we want more, the fact is that the capital cost of the actual interconnection does not make it viable for smaller entities. That's why there's a floor. What exists, and that's the reality. That's you know, and that's why you need a government that understands business, because these things are realities. But net billing provides an opportunity and for participation in energy generation and benefit from the reduced costs. So that is something to keep in mind, that everyone would not be able to enter. And every entity will not be able to enter into net wheeling, but net billing offers a greater flexibility for residential and small commercial customers. So I wanted to just make those 2 points, or 3 points rather. Mr. President, I wouldn't prolong the debate at 5:59 p.m. I would simply ask for the motion, notice of which was given on the 20th of June 2025, that it be affirmed. Thank you. That it be approved.
Okay, so the question is that the motion which was given on the 20th day of June 2025 in relation to the electricity wheeling regulations 2025 be approved. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. President, if I might ask for recommittal of the item, notices of motion given orally.
Question is that there be a recommittal to notice of motions given orally. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate I will move, whereas Section 63(1)(e) of the general consumption, of the public, large scale. So where is that one?
LPPIA.
There was a movement and a reorganization. Whereas Section 20 of the Large-Scale Projects and Pioneer Industries Tax Relief Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, provides that the Minister may make regulations generally giving effect to the provisions of the Act. And whereas on the 29th day of April 2025, the Minister made the Large-Scale Projects Tax Relief Applications Regulations 2025, and whereas subsection 2 of Section 20 of the Act provides that regulations made under subsection 1 of the section shall be subject to affirmative resolution. And whereas it is desirable that the large-scale projects tax relief application regulations 2025 be affirmed by resolution, now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable Senate as follows. 1, this resolution may be cited as the large-scale projects tax relief applications regulations 2025 resolution. And 2, the large-scale projects tax relief application regulations 2025, which was laid on the table of the Senate on the 27th day of June 2025, is hereby affirmed. And Mr. President, I move this motion on behalf of Senator Marks, who will actually seek approval of the regulations next week.
Thank you, Minister Johnson Smith. And we revert to public business.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, it falls to me now to close this particular sitting, but I just wanted to correct a matter. And again, it's really hard to keep up with ensuring that records maintain factual reflections of reality, of proceedings. And I just want to refer to an earlier reference made in this sitting, and one which clearly would have been captured by Hansard, where it was stated that the leader of government business in that other place spoke to the leader of opposition business in that other place and indicated that the Parliament would recess early. What occurred in actual fact is that he was told that the sectoral debate was ending 1 week earlier than planned. That is on June 24th instead of July 1st. But he did not say, and did not say at any time, that the Parliament would be on recess. So all this discussion that has been taking place in the public domain and indeed here is entirely misguided, Mr. President, and I use that word very gently. It's inaccurate in its entirety. It seems that assumptions were made that because it ended early, the debate ended early, that we wouldn't be sitting, but there was no basis, no reason to so think. As you can see, the agenda continues. We are in full graduation season, so we know that there's a call. Senators are absent, and they have had to leave at different stages. So we know that that time is nigh, but there's no, and has been no reason to seek to impute some sort of motive or agenda behind a rescheduling. And what occurred, again, was an early cessation of the sectoral debate, not an exchange in respect of an early end to Parliament. So I just wanted to make that clear. And Mr. President, on that treasured note of truth, I wish to ask that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. Thank you.
All right, and there we are. All right, so this Senate stands adjourned for a date to be fixed.